exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Happy birthday to you! Oh!
Not another one!
Happy birthday to you!
Will you still card me? Happy birthday, dear apple pie! Happy birthday to you! So where's the line for the spanking?
Well,
thank you, Pee Wee Herman. He came in special for us today, Tim, to wish you happy birthday.
Well, if there's a line for the spanking, I'll try to find it and report back to you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I am actually the birthday was actually last night. A group of us, including my friend Carol, who's my associate and does some of our great artwork, my niece Dory and her daughter, and we went and we had Indian food outdoors in Greenwich Village. That's my favorite food. And we had a really great time, shared a couple of glasses of wine, and then I came home relatively early. It was not a late nighter, knowing fully well that tonight is Las Vegas night for me. I'm going to a burlesque show at the club, the Three of Cups, and that should be fun, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm going with my bestie in the hood, April, and that starts at midnight if anybody wants to catch a show. But tonight, we're dressing up for Bigfoot and for Mr. Paul Bartholomew, who I call the Bigfoot activist. And I kind of know Paul, but I don't know Paul, because according to Paul, and I have no word to doubt him, he and I did a show with Jim Moseley 30 years or more ago on some New York radio station. And in those days, there was no internet, and you didn't do it, from home. You actually did it in the studio. So I believe we would have gotten our free pastrami sandwiches, which we don't get here. We have a lot of perks on KCOR, but we have not rolled in the buffet table as of yet. But we're working on that.
Would that have been a Candy Jones show?
Well, that's probably what I'm thinking. I was on with Long John a few times, but he and I were not. Well, John was actually not the most cordial person in the world. He did not have what I would call a sunny disposition, and he most of the time during the breaks, the commercial breaks and all, he kind of kept to himself. And towards the end there, he had cancer very bad, and Candy Jones, his wife, who was a model. She was with the Conover agency, and she was on the cover of many, many fashion magazines. Kind of took over for John, and I did the show, especially on Sunday night. She would have me up, I would say almost every week or every other week, probably because at that point they were having maybe a difficult time getting guests. John had started out on WOR Radio, which had a huge, in fact still does today, huge broadcast. I mean, it had 50,000 watts, and in those days you could hear the show in 23 states. And then John eventually went to NBC, where I gave him a bigger paycheck, and then somehow he ended up at WMCA, which later became a religious station of sorts. And I'm not exactly sure why he went there, but the audience, the ratings dipped, and by the time Candy took over, it wasn't quite the show that it used to be. And also, too, it was kind of, Tim, the end of the contactee era, and so there was no more George Adamski coming through town. They had passed away, and Dan Fry had gotten elderly, and George Van Tassel, I guess, had gotten in trouble with the FBI. and Buck Nelson went with his dog Bo back to Mars or something. I don't know. It was not. It was just not the same. Just not the same. But Candy actually did seem to like Bigfoot and monsters more than she liked UFOs. In fact, now Paul, when I was on the show with you, Dr. Fangboner was on with us.
Well, it was Don Fangboner. He was the curator of the Lake George Museum.
Yes. Okay. Because I had just, this would have put it then in the early to mid 1980s. Because
this would have been exactly September 21st, 1981.
There you go.
Well, now that seems a little bit earlier than I would think, but okay, if you have that down, that's fine. Because I did return from Loch Ness at that point, and I believe I talked about Loch Ness on the show. Now I did find a couple of years ago a cassette tape that I had recorded off of the radio, but it was rotted. I mean, those cassette tapes just did not last long, and you put it in the machine and it would just fall apart on you. So the tape, I do believe, of our appearance would be up at Syracuse University. That's where all of Long John's shows, the tapes went to. But last I heard, they claimed that the tapes and the boxes, I don't know, 20 boxes or something, were missing, which I find very peculiar. But Tim, we've been working on a project ourselves, keeping us very busy this week. It's the UFO Review Special. It's called Project Alien Mind Control, the new UFO terror tactics. And it's actually part of a series of magazines that we were going to release, very limited on the newsstand. I mean, I don't think you're going to find it at your 7-Eleven, but we're putting it out in magazine format. And we're going not only are Tim and I writing for it, and Sean Castile, but we got Nick Redford and Adam Rightly, and we hope to issue the magazine a book. It's almost 150 pages on a semi-regular basis, making it the only English language UFO publication actually available in print in the United States. So we're almost finished and should have that up on Amazon in just a few days. But Tim, let's not dilly-dally any longer, because I'm only going to be here a few minutes tonight. And I want you to interview our guest and start out by talking about cryptozoology. That's where we're headed tonight.
That's right. Well, we have, as you said earlier, we have Paul Bartholomew with us. And he is, he's been interested, in the paranormal and things like that for a long time. But somewhere along the line, he got interested fairly early on with Bigfoot, and he has a book out that he wrote with his brother called Bigfoot Encounters in New York and New England. So we're just really happy to have Paul with us tonight. How are you doing tonight, Paul?
Excellent. Glad to be here.
One thing I should mention before we get deeply into the conversation is that I was having a conversation online with Brad Steiger and talking about Bigfoot and I guess the recent Men in Black activity that you had investigated there in Indiana and had been on the Clyde Lewis talking about it on the air.
And somehow in Iowa.
Iowa, I'm sorry, yeah. And somehow the topic came up of Bigfoot and all that, and Brad suggested, he said, why don't you have Paul Bartholomew on the show? He's been working with me, writing, I guess, contributing material to Brad's various books over the year. And I said, sounds very interesting. And so that's how we managed to get back in touch.
Terrific. Brad's one of my favorite people in the world. Just a complete pioneer in this topic and so ahead of the curve.
Well, he has no enemies, as far as I know. Unlike most people in UFO, ufology, and probably even in cryptozoology, who have targets on their back, Brad has none. I don't think he seems to be equally admired and relished by all whose path that he crosses.
Wonderful, wonderful person.
So, Paul, how did this all start for you? I mean, did you run into Bigfoot in the woods?
No, I've actually never had a sighting. I was always interested in paranormal phenomena, and I can vividly remember the 1973 UFO flap from the Northeast. And I can remember hearing the reports on the radio and how the nation was sort of captivated with this phenomena back in 1973. And so I was interested in started beginning research at a very young age into UFOs and ufology. And, of course, once you start down that road, you're introduced into other phenomena, be it parapsychology or cryptozoology or whatnot. And then in 1976, we had a major Bigfoot-type incident in the Whitehall region. And, of course, I grew up in Whitehall, New York, which is about 5 miles from the Vermont border and is one of the places that claims to be the birthplace of the U.S. Navy. It used to be called Skenesboro, New York. And we had a sighting which involved several law enforcement agencies in rural Whitehall, New York, on a road called Abair Road. And a lot of people term that now the Abair Road incident. And it's actually spelled A-B-A-I-R. And what had happened is, in a nutshell, because it's a very complicated case, but we had at least 3 witnesses initially that cited a creature on Abair Road. These were teenagers. They sped into town, and of course, back then you didn't dial up your 911. You would go to your local town police station, and there'd be a dispatcher on duty. And they came into town and reported that they had sighted this creature beside a telephone pole out on Abair Road. And so there was a response, and the New York State Troopers, the Whitehall Patrol, and the Washington County Deputy Sheriff all responded to the scene. And over a period of a week, we had perhaps as many as 12 or 13 sightings, although that number, it varies because some people come forward, some people don't. And so, but many of which were law enforcement officials, and many told us their stories off camera. And a couple have actually gone on the record. And so this became a very famous case, a landmark case, and that really launched me into the Bigfoot investigation for the Northeast. And what we found out is that about that time, 1978 actually, John Green had come out with a marvelous book, Sasquatch, the Apes Among Us. To this day, I still put that as the top Bigfoot book out there. And, of course, we just lost John Green a short time ago, just a pioneer in this type of research. And what Mr. Green had done is done every state and the up into Canada and actually looked at the global perspective in that book. But, it was just a massive volume. And they actually included the Whitehall, New York incident from 1976 in that book. And so now we have a real phenomena going on here, and what we thought we would do is extend the what Mr. Green had done, and at that time I believe there were like 11 New York State cases. And so we thought we would take a closer look at New York and Vermont and see just how prolific the phenomena is. And what it turned out to be is that we ended up with 140 type encounters just in New York and Vermont alone. Wow. And of course that number just
when I first got interested in all the paranormal and Bigfoot, I used to go visit Ivan T. Sanderson every once in a while. He's up there in Blairstown. We thought of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, pretty much as being located in the Oregon, Washington State, maybe parts of California. It was only quite a few years later, actually, that we began to realize that there were hardly any states where Bigfoot had not been sighted. In fact, I interviewed at some point two teenagers who had seen a Bigfoot wandering across the golf course in Staten Island.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So now,
Yeah,
now today, would you say that all um, 48 states have been have UFO sightings, have Bigfoot sightings under their belt?
absolutely. And in fact, I think the lone holdout for some time was Rhode Island, and now there are some reports from Rhode Island as well. So now we have this phenomena that is I think it's more prolific in all these states than previously thought of. And of course, we thought the same thing when we thought Bigfoot. We thought of California, Oregon, Washington, up into Canada, that type of thing. But it would appear that this is a global phenomena, and as far as the U.S. goes, it's very underreported in the Northeast. In fact, if you go down south, you have the skunk ape in Florida, the falk monster in Arkansas, the Honey Island swamp monster, and they have different nicknames for these creatures, and there seem to be regional characteristics. For instance, the Honey Island swamp monster appears to be a bit more aggressive. The Florida, and these are just generalizations, the Florida skunk ape appears to be a little smaller in stature, and so forth, Nobby in North Carolina, and so on. And then, of course, you look at this on a global phenomenon, and you're dealing with the Almista in the Soviet Union, or the Chichuna. You have, where Paul Cropper and Tony Healy are from in Australia. And, of course, my brother Bob had spent much time in Australia. They have the Yowie, or the Yahoo, or the Devil's Devil down there. So this is a real global phenomena.
It seems to me that when you had you talked about the original Whitehall case with the teenagers going into the police station and reporting that they seen a creature outside, big hairy creature outside of town. I'm surprised, since at that time nobody really had heard that much about Bigfoot, that these kids didn't end up in jail for imbibing a little too much.
Well, I tell you, a little inside story is that the one of the initial teenagers who just passed away a short time ago, at a very young age, he was only 57. He was the brother of a patrol officer in Whitehall, so they knew him, and so I don't think that hurt any. And their father was the police chief, who was Wilfred Goslin, so that all helped in their favor at that time.
So, you talked about all of these diverse creatures all across the globe. Now, of course, this is just all speculation, but are they all related? Are we looking at the same kind of creature, or maybe different creatures kind of across the broad biological spectrum?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think Lauren Coleman had categorized like 9 different types. That could very well be. There seem to be these regional characteristics that separate some of these little characteristics. If you go to China, it's the Che Ren, or the wild man, and the predominant color there is red of these creatures. And they appear a little smaller than some of the Western United States reports of Sasquatch. The funny thing, though, is when we had Paul Cropper, and we've had Paul Cropper and Tony Healy in Whitehall here, and Paul's been here several times. Terrific researcher, and he does also Australian poltergeists and things. We exchanged reports, and some of the reports of the Yowie and the American Sasquatch were almost identical. And, Professor Cook, who was a professor of history and anthropology here at Castleton State College in Vermont, which is now Castleton University, and he was one of the academics involved in this, and that's why I went to Castleton and studied under Professor Cook. And Dr. Cook felt pretty, he would call these cosmic species. and say they were sort of cousins, because they appear to be related in some regard, although there is definitely a mysterious element to some of these sightings.
Oh, definitely. Well, you think about like Australia or Great Britain or places like that. I mean, Australia especially. I mean, I don't think there's any fossil record of hominids there. So it's like, where did these things come from? And how do they? Australia, I can see how they could hide better, but like in the UK, not a lot of room for them to hide.
Right. There's definitely this mysterious element, and there's some regions that would appear illogical for these creatures to exist, and yet some of our more credible reports come from those regions. So this is a phenomena that needs to be studied. If someone is an absolute skeptic and says there's nothing to this, it's rubbish, blah, 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 human perspective, whatever, then it's important to study this phenomena from the perspective that why are we seeing these creatures, credible people, credible sightings in all these different locations? It's important to understand why we are seeing it. Even if it's not a real phenomena as they would claim, then we need to know why we're seeing it. So this is a win-win for people to study this phenomena. It's an important thing to study. It's an important subject and it's very complex. And there is physical evidence as well, be it the highly disputed hair samples or things that have been crushed, footprints that have been left behind and preserved in plaster Paris. We do have some pretty compelling evidence that these creatures are physical, at least at some point.
So you do not rule out the possibility that they could also be interdimensional or paranormal?
I don't rule anything out. In fact, I sort of throw that on the table. When the Whitehall Abear Road incident happened in '76, it was during a massive UFO flap in the Northeast. In fact, all of New York State was under this huge UFO flap. And I didn't realize how prolific it was until I started researching. And we had sightings all the way down to the nuclear plants in Whitehall, Indian Point. In Lower New York. So the sightings, Shushan County, all over this region. In fact, Ray Fowler had sent an investigator up to investigate reports from the Whitehall region because there were so many UFO reports in conjunction with the creature sighting.
Well, we got a break. We got a break coming up. I can hear the sounds of the etheric coming in. So we'll be back with Paul Bartholomew in just a few minutes and my co-host, Tim Schwartz.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Boy, we are back in the lair of the Bigfoot. Now, Paul, you're talking about we're talking about maybe the supernatural element and the paranormal here, and of course there are some folks out there who think that Bigfoot is strictly hairy and smelly, and that's as far as it goes. Now, what would you say is the best case, or give us a couple examples of cases that you've investigated that either show that they're physical or show that they're paranormal or show that they're somewhere in between? What have you actually investigated firsthand that you've been convinced that there's something to Bigfoot sightings?
Right. Well, I think it's primarily the sincerity of the eyewitnesses involved. And in 1982, we had a Whitehall patrolman, actually two. One was named Dan Gordon, and he was on routine patrol at 4:30 in the morning. And they had turned around out by South Bay, which is obviously south of Whitehall, and were coming back to town. And a creature crossed the road in front of their patrol vehicle. They pulled off the road. Dan got out with his gun drawn, but the creature quickly sped away over terrain that was much too tough for him to traverse at night. The other patrolman remained in the car, was actually chewing tobacco and had swallowed it because it was such a surprising incident. And but he was determined, he wasn't going to get out of the car. So, I mean, I've talked to both of the patrolmen. They brought me to the site. I had to swear them to secrecy for 22 years. They swore me to secrecy. Could not use their names, and then finally Dan eventually came forward with his sighting. That sighting they ended up taking polygraph tests that were arranged by the History Channel show, and passed the polygraph. Of course, I had no question at all about Dan Gordon's sighting. And for a skeptic to say, well, he imagined it, which is possible for a witness to imagine it, it would have to be two patrolmen imagining the same thing, and that becomes less likely and less likely. And the most common, rational, logical explanation here is that something extraordinary crossed the road in front of these two patrolmen and surprised them. They weren't talking about the subject. They had, and they said that the creature crossed the road in about 3 steps. That's a major highway up this way, 2-lane highway. And they described it as being 7 to 8 feet tall. So that certainly is very compelling evidence that we have a real creature. Now, we add to this footprints that have been found in the region. There's 3 in particular that were found in West Rutland, Vermont, back in 1985 in September. And they were actually 3 that were cast of 6 impressions in a gravelly road, which had multiple witnesses that saw the creature run up this logging type road, and they also heard the creature's cries or screams. One other characteristic that was a red flag that it was a real case, the creature was observed throwing stones at a shed. And back then that was an odd characteristic, but it's been reported many times since. So I think that's a red flag that this was a real case. So we have very compelling anatomically correct evidence that would suggest that these creatures weigh in excess of 400 or 500 pounds. And so that's more compelling evidence to add to this phenomena. Now,
why Whitehall? I mean, why this particular area of New York State?
Well, we have certain flap regions. I remember John Keel wrote and said that the Plattsburgh region was a window area where frequent phenomena occur, whether UFO or Bigfoot related or so forth. And perhaps we have many types of regions like this. We seem to have flap areas throughout New York and Vermont, and they would be Kinderhook, New York, which is 10 miles south of Albany, where Bruce Hallenbeck has done tremendous research. We have a lot of activity in the Whitehall region. We have a lot of activity in the Rutland region, Rutland, Vermont, and the Chittenden, Vermont regions.
Well, why don't you describe to us Whitehall? I mean, are we talking about how many acres of wooded area there?
Whitehall is I don't know what the actual acreage is, but it's a small town. Basically a slice of Americana. It's a village and a town, and it's a small village. The town borders on other smaller towns, so this is kind of like a slice of Americana here. And we're about 5 miles from the Vermont border. And Whitehall itself used to be called Skeensboro, New York, and it was one of the places that claims to be the birthplace of the U.S. Navy. So it's very historical, very everywhere you go there's a marker, very historical. We're not too far from Ticonderoga, New York, where you have Fort Ticonderoga, a very famous fort. You have Lake George, which is about the same distance in the other direction, 20, 30 miles. And so we just have really a small town, small New England town here. And for summary, if we go back to the UFO aspect, the Abear Road incident that happened in 76, within a week, either prior or after that incident, we were never able to determine whether it was before August of 76 or just prior to it, or just after it. The Whitehall police dispatcher, Bob Martell, said that he had a report of a UFO had landed on a woman's lawn in the village of Whitehall on the avenues. Now, what makes this so extraordinary is if you had a UFO landing out in the country, there's a lot of acreage and, it's routine rural area. This is right in the village. Houses all around, just happens to be a big yard. And this object had apparently landed and taken off. And they actually responded to the area. Both of them drove off. And I talked to Bob Martell. He said that there was a matted down area about 12 or 15 feet in diameter. And he reached down, and what it was matted down grass. And when he reached down, he could actually still feel heat coming off of where this object had landed. And this was during the Bigfoot flap on Abear Road during the same time period. So we definitely had some sort of it wasn't just a Bigfoot sighting, we had a paranormal outbreak. So in a nutshell, there's the two different things. We have a lot of physical evidence from eyewitness testimonies, polygraph tests, respectable witnesses, anatomical plaster castings, and so forth. And we have this paranormal aspect with UFO sightings, still just as credible in the strange UFO sightings in conjunction with the Bigfoot outbreak as well. So we've got both going on here.
Now, Paul, I'm interested to know how you approached the town about the legislation to create a protective habitat for Bigfoot, and I mean, what was the reaction? I mean, was there any objections, or or just people kind of like rolling their eyes at you?
No, what had happened is that we had just had a documentary come into town. Doug Hajek had put together a documentary called Mysterious Encounters. It was a series of episodes, and one of the episodes was called The Creature of Whitehall. And the town really opened up to them when they came into town, and we got a location, they shot their show, they interviewed witnesses. It was a nice positive for the town. And I thought, there will never be another opportunity like this where everything is positive, and why don't I just go ahead and write it? So I wrote this legislation, which was sort of a cross between the Skomania County ordinance on Bigfoot, Washington State, and the CHAMP resolution, the Lake Champlain Monster Resolution from Port Henry. And it was sort of a cross between the two. And I wrote this out, and I submitted it to the town, and they passed it unanimously in the village. And then one of the representatives, Vernon Scribner, passed it in front of the town board, and the town board passed it unanimously as well. And it's a symbolic legislation. It works on several levels, and what it is it was in honor of Professor Cook, for one thing. Mm-hmm. What it is it recognizes these creatures as part of our history. And there's a rich history here. We go back to the Algonquin and the Iroquois, the Abenaki. There are legends of stone giants and giant men of the mountains and the Wendigo and so forth. So, and it goes back all the way to Samuel Champlain talked about these creatures. I believe it's pronounced the Goo-Goo, which was G-O-U, and that was the creature that they had described, was described to them by the Indians in this region, the Native Americans. So this all works on a positive level to embrace the community, embrace the phenomena. It's part of our history. Let's not shun people. Let's not make it so that Dan Gordon can't talk about it for 22 years anymore. Let's let Dan be able, even though he's a policeman, to come forward and talk about what he saw. And hopefully that's where we move. We move from this being a shunned type of experience back in the 70s to a much more open and positive type of phenomena today, and that legislation helped to do that.
What is the earliest recorded sighting? Like, I mean, as far as it actually being written up in a paper, or journal, diary, or something along that line?
Right. You go to Pownell, Vermont. There was a report from the 1800s in the New York Times. Basically, what you do is you do a word search from these search engines for newspapers. And what you plug in is obviously not Bigfoot. What you plug in are terms like creature, bear, and the big one, wild man. And if you hit wild man, you get scores of reports everywhere. That's what these creatures were called in the 1800s throughout this region. And of course, obviously, the Algonquin, the Iroquois legends go way back. So, and they were actual references to the Wendigo and things like that. And they would use terminology back then. For instance, the red eyes. One of the characteristics of the Abair Road creature was that it had red glowing eyes. Very strange eye contraption. And you can see where that would make it an even more eerie type of encounter to see these red eyes peering out at you. And as Cliff Sparks, who had a sighting in 1975, said, it was as if it was emanating from the creature, not that it was reflecting, but was like beams of light coming out. So this characteristic comes up, and if you look in the older language of reports, you would see things like they would describe it as the creature had eyes like pools of blood, things like that, and to describe the same characteristic today. So this is a common human experience from the older times, the Algonquin, the Iroquois, right up to modern day, and it's a consistent, incredibly consistent pattern of sightings with the same types of characteristics from the older days right up to, as soon as, a few weeks ago.
Now, any sort of interaction between humans and these creatures? I mean, any reports of people being abducted or attempted abductions or being attacked?
We have very few hostile encounters. In fact, most of the hostility appears on the side of hunters and things like that. At the end of the Abair Road sighting, there was actually, and it's written in the police logs. I held the logs in my hand and actually read it. And what it said is that there was a person who came into the Whitehall police station. This was back in September 1st, 1976. And it said that he shot a shotgun and .22 rifle at a huge creature that came at him at Sea Falls, which is Carver Falls Road, which is an offshoot of Abair Road, notified New York State Police. And the New York State Police investigated and found a shotgun shell, but didn't find any other evidence. Now, he was so shook that he actually went into the police station to report this. And so it was very compelling evidence that you have a sincere witness who has encountered something quite unusual. And this was a pretty established hunter for the region. So it was not as if he had stumbled across a bear or something. He'd done that before. So this was something quite different. And so we have that seems to be the aggression that's been taken in this region is on the creature itself by hunters and things like that. Now, we do have reports of the creature reaching into like a chicken coop, things like that, and grabbing food. We think, as Cook would say, if it's a physical creature or if at times it is a physical creature, then it would be opportunistic and omnivorous. And there's also evidence that it may have been feeding or going after a downed deer carcass at the time of the Abair Road incident.
How about communications?
We do have reports where there are certain people who claim that they are in situations where they feed the creatures and are gifted, given gifts, things like that. I don't know what to make of that. I keep an open mind towards all of it because it's there's some very bizarre aspects to this phenomena. And scientifically, I appreciate the argument that we should have one by now. We should have a body, but we don't. That doesn't negate the fact that the phenomena is real. But it is an odd characteristic that we don't have one. And there do seem to be these sometimes special communications where people are claim that they may leave food out and then be given some sort of a gift back and so forth. And I find that fascinating, and I am very much open to it.
How about? Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was just going to say that's not gifting. That's trading. You're trading food for something else. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. It's very strange. It's And these witnesses are very sincere about it. And in many cases, they don't want any publicity about it, and they'll work with you privately. And so I'm wide open, and you know, it's one of those things that it's a frustrating phenomenon at times, but then you have a sighting like Dan Gordon's, like Cliff Sparks, and there's no question in your mind that these people, you know, the only reason we had Cliff Sparks sighting, which is that he was the country club owner, had the sighting in 1975. He was working the greens there, went out to green 1 at 11 o'clock at night, turning off hoses and things, and there's a creature standing in the middle of the green, and it's got these red eyes, and Cliff has this golf cart, and he has a dog with him. And the creature stared at the dog, and the dog, that is usually very active, just went submissive and hung its head over the side of the cart, and then the creature sped off. And Cliff said that he thought the creature was as scared of him as he was of it. And he said the hair on the back of his neck was standing right up on end, and and he said he couldn't get over the eyes. The eyes were like light emanating, like beams of light emanating from the creature. Cliff never told his wife about the incident for a year because he was afraid that she would not, you know, be scared to go out at night and things. And then finally he told the story when the Abear Road incident happened, and the only reason we got that story is because we were friends of the family. So you get cases like that, and they are confirmation moments that there's something going on here that is real.
Well, now, have you run across any cases of mysterious human disappearances? And I'm thinking along the lines of like the David Paulides books, the missing 411.
Right. I actually spoke at a conference out in Ohio last year, and Dave was there, and I got to talk with him for a short time. And got to see his presentation, which is fascinating. In this region, we do have cases like that. He talks about a case up by Saranac Lake in which a missing boy, I couldn't go into the details, but it was basically a missing boy that had seemed to be found in an area that was unbelievable for him to have traversed. And there was also, there's a whole history of Glastonbury Mountains and the Bennington area and so forth, and we have creature sightings in the Bennington area as well. So, I don't exclude any of that. We know, whenever there's a disappearance, we have strange disappearances around here just like everywhere. I don't have any direct connection between the disappearance and creature sightings, but I am definitely open to it, and we do note we try to keep track of the disappearances from around this region as well.
I know some people have associated Bigfoot with these disappearances, but I kind of find that hard to believe. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's the modus operandi of of a Bigfoot. The way it normally behaves, and also too when it makes an appearance, doesn't Bigfoot usually come trashing through the shrubbery? I mean, he's not particularly a silent creature when he's confronting humans.
There are various reactions in this region. The one that Cliff Sparks had was probably the most common, where as soon as the creature saw him, it darted away from him, and he said, he thought it was as scared of him as he was of it. And that seems to be the most prominent reaction that we get from respectable eyewitnesses. And it would appear that these things do have, though, this curiosity. And it does appear to occasionally peek into windows and things like that. There was a sighting in 1981 from the Kinderhook region, Kinderhook, New York, which is 10 miles south of Albany. And Bruce Hallenbeck's grandmother was left in the home alone while the daughter went to get her son to come down with a gun because these creatures were making noises around the house. And while she was alone, she thought to herself, my goodness, what if one's peeking in the windows? And she had this is an elderly woman, she had a hammer in her hands, and she laughed about it later. She's like, what am I going to do with a hammer? It turns out that the tracks led right up to the air conditioner in the window. So apparently this thing was appearing in. And what we think happened is that this thing had occasionally raided the garbage pails. And when they had arrived home at it was an odd hour, they had interrupted that raiding, and it caused this outburst by at least one, maybe multiple creatures.
Yeah, we've heard a few reports also, though, Bigfoot hanging around an air conditioner. I don't know. I remember when I was in the small town of Athens, Ohio, there had been a UFO landing there, left a indention in a cornfield, very small cornfield, and I guess the teenage boy had seen the light out, in back of the house, farmhouse at night, and I went kind of on a look-see around the neighborhood, talked to people, just picked people at random, a very rural area, and found one lady who said, well, there have been some UFO sightings here, but, we got Bigfoot, on our mind more than we do UFOs. And she described how this creature would come back of the house where they were and bang on the air conditioner and leave his footprints in the soft soil. I don't know, maybe he's drinking the water there too, or trying to just get, wash his face or something. But they seem to be, seen quite a bit around the air conditioning, or maybe it's just odd to them. They hear the sound and wonder what it is. Who knows, right?
Yeah, we do have this unusual characteristic that these creatures have a curiosity about things, and they seem to be sighted in odd areas that you wouldn't expect them to be. And I remember one of the reports we had investigated was a farm. Of course, I grew up on a farm, so very familiar with this barn. And they would play music. They would have a radio. We always had a radio in the barn with us. We listened to news and music. And perhaps the music could, entice these creatures to come in to take a closer look at what was going on.
What kind of music do they like? And anyway, I'm going to leave the program in the hands of my very dedicated co-host Tim Swartz while I go out and celebrate my birthday, and I'll be here again with you all next week when our subject should be Mothman. I believe that's what we're going to be talking about. So Tim,
Happy
take
birthday,
over
Tim.
after the break. Thank you.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we're talking with Paul Bartholomew, and I want to encourage everyone out there, if you have any questions for Paul about Bigfoot, if you've had a sighting of your own, or just curious about something, then let us know. You know how to contact us. Carrier pigeon, telegraph, I don't care. We just want to hear from you. So thank you and I want to thank everyone for listening tonight as well, because this is an absolutely fascinating topic. Bigfoot, strange cryptids, always a favorite subject of mine. Now, Paul, there were some things that you said in the previous hour that I want to make note of. You had mentioned that a lot of these sightings, especially around your area, people were reporting that these creatures seem to have self-luminous red eyes. Which,
right.
To me, I mean, that's very reminiscent of the Mothman sightings there over in West Virginia in 1967, 68.
Yep. It's one of those things, as a researcher, it would be a lot easier for me if that characteristic didn't come up. If the characteristic of only 5 toes would come up, things like that.
Right.
But as a researcher, I just lay this stuff out as it's reported and, let the chips fall where they may. And this is just the way it is.
One of the things that also it makes me think of, there was and this took place in the 1970s, and I can't remember the exact location now, but it was northern Ohio, I think fairly close, to the border over there, like around Ohio and Pennsylvania, where a family for a number of weeks were basically, harassed by numerous Bigfoot type creatures. That, they sounded like babies crying. They had the glowing red eyes, but they also had UFO sightings. They said that they would see UFOs land in the woods nearby, and then shortly thereafter, these creatures would come out of the woods. Screaming like crying children with their red glowing eyes, and it seemed almost like these creatures were acting like a what's the word I'm thinking of? Like a distraction to distract away possibly from the UFO sighting.
Yeah, we get this. For instance, that Abear Road sighting was definitely there. We found out more recently that there were even more UFO sightings in the region than we were even aware of when we first wrote the book about it. So it's one of those things where it just happens to be that's what's going on, and whether there's a direct connection or not, it's hard to draw those parallels, but you can't ignore it. And I think that as a researcher, we're responsible to report it as it is, and that's just the way this happens to be reported.
Well, and that's just it. Now, especially when you go back to the original sightings that you were referring to in the 1970s, not that many people had heard about Bigfoot unless they were watching, what was it, Leonard Nimoy, and shows like what was it, In Search of? I think it's shows like that. Most people, a majority of people had never heard of Bigfoot, yet you were getting reports that were very consistent. And I always like to point that out, to the skeptics and debunkers. Is like, okay, well, how come you have people who had never heard of Bigfoot before? It wasn't not like today where you could turn on the television, find 5 or 6 different Bigfoot type shows.
Right.
On cable, yet the same kinds of reports were coming in. The same types of creatures were being seen, and I just find that just really interesting.
Absolutely, and you had researchers like Brad Steiger and John Keel, and they were definitely ahead of the curve on this, and they noted these types of connections or possible parallel phenomena going on years before it was even thought of by the mainstream.
Now we have a question. Thank you, Tina. This is from Frank from Las Vegas, and he wants to know, Paul, what do you think about the show Killing Bigfoot? I don't know if you've seen it, and the reputed hoaxer Rick Dyer. Any comments?
I don't. Well, I don't watch the show. The Dyer hoax may have set back the modern look at cryptozoology a good decade, because it was at that time that the USA Today had been running some articles. There was a lot of interest, and then when the news conference happened, the Georgia hoax, everything sort of fell apart. And I think it's one of the most unfortunate incidents that's ever happened in modern cryptozoology.
Just always seems like that whenever you have a popular subject like that. We've seen that with UFOs time and time again. Hoaxers, just for whatever perverse pleasure that they get out of it. A lot of them, it doesn't seem to, involve money. It just seems to be that they just like doing it, or maybe they. They're closet skeptics or closet debunkers, and they just want to prove, how gullible people are in believing these stories.
Extremely, extremely disappointing, and what it does is it casts this ridicule over witnesses like Dan Gordon, accomplished police officer and things like that. And it creates this stigma. It helps to create this stigma where officials can't talk about this subject, whether it's Department of Environmental Conservation, New York State Police, your local police officer. They won't talk about this subject because of this type of unfortunate ridicule that they have to endure because of hoaxers like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you come across any local stories that happened years ago that the person who had the sighting never told anybody about it except their own family, and maybe even after they were dead and gone, did the story finally get to you?
All the time. Mm-hmm. Very common. In fact, I always say that the witnesses have everything to lose and nothing to gain by coming forward with their experience, and it is often a negative for them. And if you're in law enforcement, if you're in any type of forestry or anything like that, it's perhaps a career killer. So they really have nothing to gain by doing this. And so we do get reports like that all the time. In fact, I had a person come to the house one day, and he met me face to face. He sat down. He told me the story about his sighting of a creature not too far from where Dan Gordon had his sighting out by South Bay. And he said he was driving along. He saw this creature. It was reaching up towards the top of a limb. He said it had to be about 8 feet tall. It was very dark black. And he says, but you can't use my name. And he had an official title as well that I can't use. So these are confirmation moments, but you can't do much with that report except to note it. But at the same time, you understand where that person is coming from, where they don't want to be subjected to this ridicule factor.
I have for years and years, and I always talk about this. The thing that convinced me very early on that people are having genuine experiences, whether it be cryptid sightings or UFOs or ghostly experiences, is that I will get people that will come to me. They will tell me their story. They're not interested in having it publicized. They really don't want anybody else to know about it. Sometimes not even their own family. They just want somebody to talk to about it. Somebody who will listen to them, not make fun of them, and maybe say, you're not alone. There are other people who have had these very same types of experiences. You're not crazy.
Yeah, they're looking for peace of mind, some way to feel that they're part of a larger number of people that are having the same type of sightings, and they would be absolutely shocked if they realized how many people there were who don't talk about it, who've had the same type of experience. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have a question from Brenda from Massachusetts, and she wants to know, she's asking about I think it was, Dr. Nancy Ketchum and her group who is doing the DNA testing on hair and scat and things like that. And she was just wanting to know if you were familiar with that and if you've heard anything else about it after, I guess, the initial release of the early information, and then the character defamation that happened afterwards.
Right. I don't have any inside track on that. I know the Ketchum and Sykes studies are extremely controversial. There's a whole backlash to some of it. I don't get involved in those types of arguments. I'm just as anyone else. I'm interested in learning what their findings are as well.
Well, concerning that though, I mean, have you run across any physical evidence yourself? Hair or scat, or even interesting footprints?
Yes, the most compelling evidence we have are some of the footprints that have been preserved in plaster of Paris, and these are particularly the West Rutland, Vermont, from 19 85, we have 3 of 6 impressions that were in a gravel road. And these 3 show the pressure ridges, and they seem to be very very anatomically correct. And back then, a big footprint, often, somebody would go out and make a big footprint, and be a big hoax like the Allegom, Massachusetts hoax of 76.
Right.
It's just a big footprint. I think it was probably plywood they used, things like that. This is different. These tracks show the ridges and bulges, and they're very consistent with something that weighs a lot of pounds, and that it created these impressions in a very tough terrain. This wasn't, beside a creek mud or anything like that. This was a gravelly type of road, and so I'm pretty comfortable with those being legitimate, and for those reasons, the anatomical breakdown of the castings. And we do have casts like that. The unfortunate thing is, when there's pines, we have a lot of pines in this region, and when you get pine needles on the ground and so forth, it's very tough to get good casts. You really have to look for that opportunity when you have casts, footprints beside like a creek, things like that, where there's really nice terrain to get a good casting from. But yes, we have evidence like that, and I think it's very compelling that this is at some times that this phenomena is physical.
What about photographs or video? I mean, have you seen any from your area or from some of the cases that you've investigated that seems to be good? Seems to be good. People point out a lot of times, especially when it comes with UFOs, that everybody's got a cell phone with a camera in it now. Yet
that's right.
You're not seeing. You would think that if these things existed in the amount that people are reporting them, that there'd be all kinds of pictures and videos.
Yeah, we are starting to see more of the camera trail cam type pictures emerge, and I think obviously the granddaddy of the photographic evidence would be the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Right.
And to this day, I'm still leaning towards that being legitimate. If the thing is though that if that film were proven to be a hoax tomorrow, and I have no evidence that it will be, but if that were to happen, it doesn't impact the creature phenomena, the Bigfoot phenomena here at all, because the phenomena goes so far back. But I am of the feeling that Bob Gimlin is very convincing. I believe that, as of right now, I believe that that's a legitimate film, maybe the best physical or photographic evidence we have. Now, in this region, not far from Whitehall, about maybe 20 minutes, you have Hubbardton, Vermont, and we have a fellow there named Frank Suzinski. Mm-hmm. And Frank had set up a trail cam in his yard because he wanted to see what was eating all these apples. He had this apple tree, and something was eating the apples, and he would get pictures on that that would be of coyotes, which I didn't realize coyotes ate apples, but he has pictures of the coyotes actually eating the apples. We have, he has bears, things like that wander by, and then in this one strange picture, and if anybody were to Google, Frank Suzinski, Vermont trail cam Bigfoot, the picture would come up. We have this image of this large whitish creature that appears under the tree, and it looks like it's gathering apples. And it's kind of it's hard to make out because it's a little blurry. It was one of the earlier trail cam pictures, cameras. So that, I think, is legitimate. Now, I know Frank. I've known him for years, and there's no question about whether it's, a hoax or real. It's real, no question about it. And he didn't even realize what he had on there because his wife, Nancy, is the one who actually saw the image. And we've had that analyzed all over the place. They analyzed it. Bruce Maccabee took a look at it, naval physicist.
Right.
And Bruce was quite impressed with it, and he said based on the shadows and formulas that go right over my head. He looked at it and said that whatever this is isn't close to the camera. That it's not, because some people had said, that's just a bird swooping in close to the lens, something like that. He said that's not the case based on the shadows that are in the picture, and that whatever it is away from the camera and is a very large object. Now, we had men, average-sized men, get in the same position as the creature appears to be, and it dwarfs them. So we're left with the very uneasy analysis here that, since it's based on Bruce Maccabee, who I'm willing to accept his analysis that it's not something close to the lens, we have something very large that is eating apples, and whatever it is was there for less than a minute, because the camera resets after a minute and would have taken another picture, and it doesn't. So we know that whatever it is moved in and left within a minute. It was swooping up apples. There appears to be almost an arm or a paw in one part of the picture, as if it may have been holding a young. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. It's one of those really mysterious pictures, and I don't think it'll ever be officially, 100% solved, and it'll be controversial forever, but I know from a researcher point of view that is 100% legitimate. There's no hoaxing involved, and it's simply a matter of, Frank said to me, he said, what would you do with the picture? I said, you know what, I would post it, and, let the criticism come in, let people tear it apart, whatever they want to do, and let's get analysis of it. And I thought what would happen is somebody would send in a similar picture, and they would say, there, that's what it is, it's this. Mm-hmm. And it's been 6 years now, and no one has produced a similar picture.
Well, it makes me think of, and I can't remember where this was taken, but the trail cam photographs that showed what looked to be like a young Bigfoot bent over, sniffing at some stink bait that the person who put up the trail cam had put out, because I think he was looking for a bear, and it's the oddest looking thing. I mean, it looks like a chimpanzee bent over, smelling this, but the experts say no, it's a young bear. And so I haven't seen a lot of young bear in real life, but I tell you something. If that was a young bear, it was maybe the skinniest, mangiest young bear I had ever seen. Do you know the case that I'm referring to? I wish I could remember exactly where that took place. Just offhand.
I'm not sure offhand. But, I know what you mean, because, I think these trail cams are really extremely helpful. And what we're finding is that in this region of New York and Vermont, we aren't supposed to have catamounts. They're supposed to have been extinct about, I believe it was the turn of the century, and they actually have a catamount that was either a picture or a stuffed, I forget which is at one of the museums, which is supposed to be the last catamount. That was in Vermont. Well, it turns out that we have more catamount footage than you could shake a stick at here, with people coming forward with pictures taken in New York and Vermont of catamounts. And, of course, catamount's real easy to determine. If it's got a short tail, it's either a lynx or a bobcat. If it has a long tail that is usually the size of the body or better, it's a catamount. There's no other animal to explain it. And the DEC may privately talk to you about it and say, geez, that looks like a catamount. But publicly, they do not exist in this area, and they are adamant about it. Well, my uncle just passed away. Dr. Lloyd Bartholomew was a doctor at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. Very credible person. He had a house in Pulteney, Vermont. And at broad daylight, we're talking about noon, he had friends over. They looked out in the field, in front of his field, and there is a catamount crossing the field. He had surveillance footage of it. He picked up his camera and took pictures of it. He talked to his friends who looked at it. They said, what's that? He says, oh, that's a catamount. And they watched this for several minutes as it crossed the and they had seen it a year earlier, but they didn't have the photographic evidence. He contacted the Vermont officials, and the Vermont official told him that the only catamounts that existed in Vermont were mascots for the sports teams. So, that's the type of reaction that we get. And I think these trail cam pictures absolutely prove the Catamount exists. And if you have something that's even less populous, that such as the Bigfoot phenomena, and a little more mysterious, then you're going to get even fewer trail cam pictures. But ones like what Frank got, I think, are legitimate. Mm-hmm. And, the other thing with the DEC, and I have nothing but respect for DEC except, on some of these issues. But these are usually people that will talk to you privately and tell you different things than they do officially.
All right, and, Paul, let me interrupt you here because we have to go to our break. So when we come back, we will continue our discussion about Bigfoot and other cryptids. So stay tuned.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Here we are back. It's the last segment of Exploring the Bizarre. And I tell you something, the time has just really flown by tonight. We just have an very fascinating guest, Paul Bartholomew, talking about Bigfoot, especially sightings where I don't think that a lot of people would expect to see Bigfoot. Along the New York, Vermont, Pennsylvania, places like that. Now, Paul, during the break, you had mentioned that you had forgotten to say something to Tim Beckley before he had to leave about a certain lake monster that you guys had talked about on that radio show back in 1981.
Yeah, we had Don Fangboner on, and he was the curator at the Lake George Museum. Mm-hmm. And the reason we're on was because they were hosting a festival up there called Monster Fest, and it was about the famous Lake George monster hoax. And what had happened is back in the day, somebody had rigged up this head and neck, which is sort of a long pole, and you had this cutout head, and you had what were twine, pieces of gnarly twine there that would get wet and look like some sort of a mane. And you had big, those insulators, those big round insulators as eyes, and they had rigged this up to rise in and out of the lake. And this became legendary as being part of a hoax that was created on Lake George. You called it the Lake George Monster Hoax, or Georgie is what it was called. And we actually have pictures of the actual device that was used.
Do you think? I mean, were there people who were actually fooled by this?
Whether they were fooled or whether it became such a legendary hoax or whatever, I think it probably in the day there were. In fact, you remember the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained there, Ivan Sanderson's group. They actually had a picture of Georgie on the cover of one of their Pursuit episode editions.
Right, that newsletter they put out.
Yes, yeah, and I can remember holding it in my hands there and taking pictures of it. It was fairly small, but it was kind of ingenious how they created this strange monster.
Well, it doesn't. That's the thing. I mean, it doesn't require a lot to create a hoax and to fool people. With the exception, I think, with some investigators or researchers who really know what they're looking for, but you have some people who I think they're just so eager to have their own personal theories confirmed that they'll seize upon something like that and and just run with it.
Yeah, some of the incidents out there, some of this phenomena, the skeptic can really choose pick and choose what they want, and they can make this distorted. Same way some believers can do the same thing. You can pick and choose and make what you want of it. As a researcher, I guess my primary message would be report the phenomena as it's reported, as closely to it as to the real event when it happens. In fact, when you have a sighting, you want to take down details as quickly as possible, because things get lost over the years and details, change and so forth. You want to get that information, it's very important, as quickly as possible. And things that don't sound right, like back when we recorded the 1985 incident from West Rutland, when it was sighted throwing rocks at a shed. Mm-hmm. That seemed like right out of left field. Now we know that that's a fairly common report. Back then it wasn't. So these are little things that need to be recorded, little details that don't seem significant at the time. I think we just have to make sure we get that information down as quickly as possible and as accurately as possible.
Now, what is your opinion of the way the media, whether it be local or national, handles these types of stories? And the reason I ask this is because I think about, I saw a report where the cast of one of these Bigfoot shows were in a town. And they were asking people to come to a town meeting and give their own Bigfoot sightings, and a local television reporter was interviewing one of these investigators, and she was surprised that there was more than one Bigfoot. She was under the impression that I guess that Bigfoot was a singular creature, because she asked a question like, well, Bigfoot is seen, like in Oregon and Washington. How did it get all the way over here? And right. The person just kind of looked at her cross-eyed. It was like, there's more than one.
I had that happen one time. I mentioned that there were small communities of these creatures. And what I meant was, and I think what most people interpreted was, that there's areas that these creatures are more prominent in. And the question to her is, well, she asked me, well, why aren't we finding these buildings and things if they're small communities? So you do get that type of thing. Now, I think in the overall reports, in the overall phenomena, the UFO phenomena particularly, if I were a reporter and if I was an editor and I wanted to do a story on UFOs, and I took my young reporter and said, listen, you've got 3 days, go out, give me the most credible stuff you got. It's almost a mission impossible for that reporter if he doesn't have a background in the phenomena to begin with. No matter where he goes, he's going to get contradictory information. He's going to be so overloaded with baloney mixed in with highly credible stuff that he isn't going to know where to turn. And God forbid he goes into like the contact from Pleiades or things like that. He's going to be so confused. There's no way he's going to be able to put out an accurate article. So in that respect, you really need this 50-year learning curve by someone to do accurate reporting. It's great we have people like Lee Spiegel and people like that, George Knapp, who have that learning curve. Because I feel for some of the reporters, and in cryptozoology it's the same way. You really there's a large learning curve that needs to be assigned to anybody that to cover this accurately.
Now, what about in your area? Have you run across any sightings now of Dogmen? That seems to be the big thing now. I mean, over the last 10 years or so, I mean, I've seen like this huge increase of people seeing Dogmen.
I've noticed that trend. I guess a lot of them, I think it was Michigan or Wisconsin. A lot of reports as well. I haven't noticed that around here. In fact, the reports around here are incredibly consistent with primate-like but we do get the odd characteristic, and not always, but we do get that odd characteristic of the red glowing eyes, sometimes not. We had a wonderful report from here that Frank Suzinski had sent me, and I interviewed the kids. There were two kids who had their grandmother literally across the road. They were outside. It was after a rainstorm, and they were looking for salamanders. And they started, and I used to do the same thing, is we'd throw rocks at a tree, play baseball, and they were throwing some rocks at a tree, and all of a sudden this creature darted out, and it was your typical 8 foot tall, looked like an ape. They drew pictures of it. They were so close to it that they saw that, and it was kind of a funny story. The younger boy was getting ready to throw a rock, and his reaction was, should I throw it? And the older brother says, no, don't throw it. And that's a typical reaction that if somebody was making up the story, they wouldn't say something like that. Well, they yelled for the grandmother. By the time the grandmother got there, she confirmed how scared they were and how their stories were consistent. But she didn't see anything. It darted away when the grandmother came over. Now, this is in broad daylight, and they said that they were so close to it that they could see sideburns on the side of the creature's face. And this is one of those confirmation moments. There is absolutely no question in my mind when I interviewed these kids and they brought me back to the site, I interviewed the grandmother, the family, no question in my mind that these kids saw something very strange. And it may have been watching them. And when they threw the stone, it had to come out and show itself. And I think it's a completely consistent report, and you get these reports time to time again, and it is of an ape-like creature, but walks like a man. And that recent footage of, the skeptical say, well, bears stand up on all twos. That recent footage of Pedals the bear from New Jersey, there's no way you can look at that and go, looks like a girl. It looks like a bear. It actually looks a little awkward. It takes short steps. And there's no mistaking it's a bear. In fact, I'm not aware of anybody who's seen that and said, looks like a Bigfoot. And these creatures that are cited by the policemen and so forth, they cross the road in 3 steps. Pedals would take 8, 10, 12 steps, whatever, and you'd be able to clearly see it was a bear. And it would appear that Pedals walks like that because of an injury. And that's probably what happened in that case. But my point is that we seem to have this consistent primate-like creature in this area, and I am not. Now, we may have Dogman-type reports here. It's very possible. You get all sorts of strange creature sightings, but I'm not aware of any.
The thing about, you pointed out the difference between a bear walking upright and, these cryptid hominids. A lot of people who actually have witnessed, a Bigfoot walking away from them, they notice that it has a butt, that it has buttocks, which a bear doesn't. And I know I talked to somebody who she was just absolutely, that just floored her, that she saw this creature walking away from her and that it had a butt. And she just she was focused on that part of the sighting. When
we did our original book back in the 90s, which is called Monsters of the North Woods, we had a cover picture put on the original, I think 750 copies or so forth, and it was an artwork that was done by a local artist here named Eric Miner, very accomplished artist, and I described the report to him, and sure enough, it is the backside of the creature walking away next to a telephone pole, and the most prominent thing, if you go dead center of the picture, is the butt. Can't miss it. Yep. And it was absolutely part of the reports from the Abear Road incident, and it's a consistent characteristic that comes up when the creature's walking away. Absolutely.
And what people don't realize is that, if you have a creature that has buttocks like that, that's an upright walking creature. This isn't something that just, every once in a while, like a bear, gets up on its hind legs and walks around. This is something that's how it walks. You don't have a rear end like that unless you're an upright walker.
That's right.
Okay, so we've danced around it a little, a little bit during this show, and I know that and it doesn't seem to be the case with you, Paul, but I know with a lot of Bigfoot researchers, the idea that we may be talking about maybe a combination of physical creatures and something other than physical. And I mean, I know that you like to take the information and record it as it is without putting your own theories and speculations upon it. But I mean, do you think that we are dealing with several different types of entities here? Maybe something that is physical, but maybe there is something else that looks similar to a physical creature, but seems to have, for want of a better term, paranormal elements about it.
When I first began researching into this, I was of the opinion that we were probably dealing with physical flesh and blood, pretty consistent, credible sightings of real creatures. Mm-hmm. The more you get into it, the more you delve into behind-the-scenes details that aren't reported, publicly. You find little characteristics that pop up, like these red glowing eyes, like occasional the beams of light that seem to be coming out of the eyes, the disappearances in a flash of light, things like that. The UFO sightings that seem to be a consistent pattern amongst some sightings. Now, most of the sightings don't have UFO sightings connected to them, but we have these outbreaks like A-Bear where there was a definite element and it was not reported as widely as it probably should have been. When you get characteristics like that, when you look at the research that people like George Knapp and Com Kelleher did with the Skinwalker Ranch, when you look at that type of phenomena, when you look at the pioneers in this research, like Brad Steiger and John Keel, who talked about window areas back in the 1960s, that's the type of phenomena that, whether we're dealing with quantum physics, whether we're dealing, back then, who would have thought dark matter encompassed most of the universe?
Right.
Now we know that, so everything is switched. It would appear that we have a quantum physical element involved here, whether it's paranormal, parapsychological, which I haven't been able to figure out, probably never will, but that it is a consistent part of these phenomena when you dig deep into the reports. Now, the initial reporter will report about, a sighting of an ape-like creature. It rakes back to when the Native Americans talked about, Sasquatch or whatever, and this has become a legendary creature. But they won't delve much deeper than that. And when you start delving into this year after year, and you start talking to witnesses who've had these encounters and then had other encounters that weren't reported widely, but smack of this paranormal element, then I guess the short answer is I think there's a lot more to this than the initial surface. And I think we're dealing with perhaps a deeper understanding with quantum physics as to what's really going on here, whether we're dealing with parallel realities. Of course, Hynek talked about that prior to when he passed away. He was very open about parallel realities that are talked about through all of religions and things, and perhaps we're really dealing with this. And it does appear that there's a connection at times between these phenomena.
It makes me think about there was a series of cryptid sightings here in south central Indiana in the early 1970s. And at one point, these people, there was a ruckus out in their chicken coop. So when they went out there, they were met by this large creature that was standing in the doorway of the chicken coop. And they said that its shoulders were so broad that it filled the entire frame. Well, one of the men of the family shot at it with a shotgun. And when he shot it, they said it disappeared in a flash of light, like somebody had taken, like a flash camera. and had flashed and disappeared. And it then subsequently reappeared across the field right along the edge of the woods. And it then like disappeared into the woods, but it was physical enough that it managed to rip up a number of chickens in the chicken coop.
Absolutely, that is in a nutshell. That is the type of phenomena we're dealing with, in which we have both metaphysical and physical phenomena that can be collected. For the skeptic that needs hard physical evidence, we've got some casts that are pretty compelling. And for the other aspect of this involving UFOs and the metaphysical type of connection, it seems that it's undeniable at times. And I think the work like Bigelow did there with the Skinwalker and things like that, I think those are really groundbreaking things. And I couldn't agree more. We get this. I think there's some sort of connection, but I wonder if I'll ever understand it.
Well, and you have Les Stroud, in his TV show where he was looking for Bigfoot. They had put an apple up in a tree and had put a trail cam on it, but this was a trail cam. I mean, it took a shot like every second. And when they went back and looked at it later, the apple is up in the tree, one shot, and then a second later, it's gone. And I mean, but it hadn't fallen out. It wasn't on the ground. It was just gone.
Right. Well, I mean, you have cases like Enfield, England, in which things would appear and rematerialize in other areas. That was reported. Paul Cropper, who does the Australian cryptozoology reports and has done a lot of research on Australian poltergeists. Great guy. There's few people you meet that you just bet, there's no question about whatever he says is accurate. And he's experienced this type of phenomena where things appear to appear and disappear, and, from locked drawers and things like that. So, rocks falling from the ceiling of a home. Yep. But it happens, and it's one of those things that it's puzzling, but, I have no question that this is a reality. And I also have no question that people are going to be kind of reluctant to report anything like that because it's going to invite nothing but negative reaction from people. And so, unfortunately, we've got to get this out into the light where people don't have to be afraid to report this. It would be great if Dan Gordon could have come out in 1982 and said, I had a Bigfoot sighting. I had a sighting of a creature that crossed the road, and I don't know what it was. And that would have been great, but he would have been stigmatized. And he had to be quiet, and it bothered him. It bothered him for years and years. In fact, he only came forward after he had health crisis, and he has since passed away, after he had several health crises, and he wanted to get it off his chest.
Well, Paul, we only have a couple minutes left in the program here, unfortunately. So I want to give you the chance to let the audience know where they can find out more about you, books out on Amazon, got a website, anything like that.
Sure. You can get a hold of me at, my email is bf yeti, which is YETI, the number 1, at yahoo.com. So it's bfyeti1 at yahoo.com. Or you can just, message me on Facebook.
And what's your, what is it, Paul, Facebook at Paul Bartholomew?
Yeah, just for Paul Bartholomew.
Okay, and let's see. Is your book still available on Amazon or places like that?
We have a book out, Bigfoot Encounters in New York and New England, which is still around through Hancock House. Okay. And so if you go to www.hancockhouse.com, there should be information on where that can be picked up, and that is accurate right up to it's updated up to I think 2008. So it's probably the if you want a book on New York and Vermont and New England, the states Massachusetts, Maine, up in this region, that's the book to get because it really goes in depth into those regions.
Any plans on coming up with a new one soon?
My brother's in Australia. New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And he's always working on something. And I imagine we'll be putting together a book on northeastern mysteries soon. And we had been working on one on various anomalies through through the northeast New England area. And so we'll be working on that.
Okay, Paul, I'm going to have to wrap it up here. So thank you very much for being our guest tonight. You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre on the mighty KCOR Digital Radio Network. I'm Tim Swartz. Good night. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.